The bitter autumn wind carried the scent of approaching rain as it whipped through Cottonwood Springs, a dusty settlement carved from the unforgiving Arizona territory. It was 1878, and the small mining town had seen better days since the silver veins had started to run dry. Inside the Broken Spoke Saloon, smoke hung thick in the air as Isaac Donovan nursed his whiskey, his worn Stetson resting on the scarred wooden table before him. The 30-year-old rancher had built a modest spread 10 miles outside of town, earned through years of backbreaking work and careful planning. He wasn't a man given to fancy notions, but tonight, something unsettled him, a strange anticipation he couldn't explain. The saloon doors swung open, bringing with them a gust of cold air and the silhouette of a woman. The raucous laughter and piano music faltered as she stepped inside, her figure draped in what could only be described as rags. Dust caked her threadbare dress, and her dark hair hung in tangles around a face too gaunt for its natural beauty. Yet, despite her obvious hardship, she held herself with unmistakable dignity. Isaac found himself standing before he'd even realized it, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. Something about her struck him with the force of a lightning bolt, something familiar in those determined eyes that scanned the room. "That's my bride," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. Every head turned toward him, including the woman's. Her eyes, a striking shade of amber, widened with confusion and wariness. "Mister, I don't know you," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. Isaac approached her slowly, aware of the dozen pairs of eyes watching this strange exchange. "Olivia? Olivia Callahan?" he asked, though he already knew. The woman before him was thinner, weathered by hardship, but unmistakably the same woman whose photograph he'd carried for the past 3 months. "How do you know my name?" She took a step back, her hand reaching for the doorframe, as if preparing to flee. "I'm Isaac Donovan. We've been corresponding for nearly 6 months. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "You were supposed to arrive 3 months ago. I thought you'd changed your mind, or—" He didn't finish the thought, the alternatives too grim to voice. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by embarrassment, as she glanced down at her tattered clothing. "Mr. Donovan, There were complications." Her voice trembled slightly. "The stagecoach was robbed outside of Tucson. I lost everything." The other patrons of the saloon, realizing they were witnessing a long-awaited reunion rather than some delusion from the usually level-headed rancher, returned to their drinks and conversations, though many cast curious glances their way. "You've been traveling for 3 months?" Isaac asked, concern etching his features. "Working my way here? Yes." Olivia's chin lifted slightly. "I made a commitment, Mr. Donovan. I don't break my word. A mail-order bride who'd overcome robbery, destitution, and a journey alone through the dangerous territory to honor an agreement made with a stranger." Isaac felt a swell of admiration that surprised him with its intensity. "You must be hungry," he said, gesturing to an empty table. "And please, call me Isaac." She hesitated, looking around at the rough establishment. "I didn't expect our first meeting to be like this." Isaac removed his coat and gently placed it around her shoulders. "Neither did I, but I'm just glad you're here, Miss Callahan." "Olivia," she corrected, finally allowing a small smile to soften her features. "After all, according to you, I'm your bride." The bartender approached with a glass of water and a bowl of stew. "On the house," he said gruffly, nodding to Isaac. "Congratulations on finding your lady." As Olivia gratefully accepted the food, Isaac studied her face. The woman he'd been corresponding with had described herself as 23, educated, and from a good Boston family fallen on hard times after her father's business failed. Her letters had been intelligent and thoughtful, revealing a woman of character and wit. Looking at her now, despite her condition, he could see that woman in her dignified bearing and the intelligence in her eyes. "I have a room at the boarding house," Isaac said. "You can stay there tonight. I'll take a room at the hotel." "The arrangements we discussed," Olivia began carefully after swallowing a spoonful of stew. "I understand if you wish to reconsider, given my current state." Isaac shook his head. "Our arrangement stands, if you still want it. We agreed to a proper courtship after your arrival, leading to marriage if we suit. Nothing's changed." Relief crossed her face. Thank you. I wasn't sure what I would do if... She left the sentence unfinished. But the shadow that passed over her face spoke volumes about the desperation that had driven her west. Outside, the threatening rain finally began to fall, drumming against the saloon's roof. The piano player struck up a lively tune, and the noise level in the room rose again. "How did you know it was me?" Olivia asked after a moment. "I must look nothing like my photograph." Isaac hesitated, then answered truthfully. "It wasn't the appearance. It was something in the way you carried yourself, proud, even in difficulty." He offered her a small smile. "Also, we don't get many unaccompanied women walking into the Broken Spoke." Olivia's laugh was unexpected and bright, transforming her tired face. "I suppose that's true. I've learned to be cautious in my travels, but I was told this was where I might find you. You went through a lot to get here." "I did." Her expression grew serious. "My options in Boston were limited after my father's death. The debt collectors took everything. Your advertisement in the newspaper offered a chance at a new beginning." Isaac nodded. "My ranch isn't much yet, but it's growing. I've got good water rights and healthy cattle. It's a hard life. Though." "Harder than traveling penniless across half the country?" Olivia asked with a raised eyebrow. He conceded the point with a slight smile. "Perhaps not." As they talked, the initial awkwardness began to fade. Isaac found himself drawn to her resilience and intelligence. The woman from the letters was indeed the woman before him, despite her rough appearance. By the time her bowl was empty, the rain outside had intensified into a downpour. "We should get you to the boarding house before it gets any worse," Isaac said, rising and offering his hand. Olivia stood, still wrapped in his coat. "Thank you, Isaac, for not turning me away." "I made a commitment too," he replied simply. "I don't break my word either." They stepped out into the rain-soaked street where Isaac's wagon waited, covered against the weather. He helped her climb up onto the seat, noticing how she winced slightly. Before she could protest, he lifted her the rest of the way, struck by how little she weighed. "I'll take you to meet Mrs. Peterson," he explained as he took the reins. "She runs the boarding house. She's a good woman, though she can be somewhat inquisitive." "I imagine my arrival will give her plenty to be inquisitive about," Olivia responded dryly. The rain pelted them as Isaac guided the wagon down the muddy main street. In the growing darkness, the lights from windows created golden rectangles that reflected in the puddles forming on the ground. The journey was short, but by the time they reached the two-story clapboard building at the edge of town, they were both soaked. Mrs. Peterson, a round woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes, opened the door before they'd even knocked. News traveled fast in Cottonwood Springs. "So, this is your mail order, bride," she said, looking Olivia up and down. "Poor thing looks half-starved. Come in. Come in." The warmth of the house enveloped them as they stepped inside. A fire crackled in the hearth of a modest but clean parlor. "Rebecca Peterson," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand to Olivia. "Don't you worry about a thing. We'll get you situated proper." "Thank you," Olivia said, her exhaustion finally showing. "I appreciate your kindness." "Isaac, you wait here," Mrs. Peterson commanded. "I'll get Miss Callahan settled and find her something decent to wear. Can't have your intended looking like she just rolled in with the tumbleweeds." Isaac nodded, grateful for the older woman's practical approach. As Mrs. Peterson led Olivia upstairs, he caught a last glance from his intended bride, a look that held both uncertainty and hope. While he waited, Isaac stared into the fire, contemplating the unexpected turn of events. He had almost given up hope when Olivia hadn't arrived on the scheduled stagecoach. Each passing day had diminished his expectations until he'd finally accepted that she wasn't coming. Now, here she was, having endured hardships. He could only imagine to fulfill her promise. Mrs. Peterson returned alone some 20 minutes later. "That poor girl's been through hell," she said without preamble. "Thin as a rail and bruised up too. Says she's been working as a dishwasher and laundress in every town between here and Tucson to earn her way." Isaac frowned. "Bruised? Nothing too concerning," Mrs. Peterson assured him. "Marks of hard living mostly, but she needs rest and food." She fixed him with a stern look. "And time, Isaac. Whatever arrangements you two had, she needs time to recover." "Of course," Isaac said quickly. We agreed to a proper courtship regardless. Mrs. Peterson seemed satisfied with his response. She'll be down in a minute. I gave her one of my daughter's old dresses. It's a bit large, but it's clean and whole. When Olivia descended the stairs a short time later, the transformation was remarkable. Her face had been washed, her hair brushed and tied back with a ribbon. The borrowed blue dress hung loosely on her frame, but she looked infinitely better than she had in the saloon. Most noticeably, there was color in her cheeks and a new alertness in her eyes. You look well, Isaac said, standing as she entered the parlor. Mrs. Peterson has been very kind, Olivia replied, casting a grateful look toward their hostess. Just doing what's Christian, the older woman demurred. Now, Isaac, I expect you'll be calling tomorrow at a decent hour. The girl needs rest tonight. Yes, madam. He reached for his hat. I'll come by after the morning chores, around 10 if that's acceptable. Olivia nodded. I look forward to it. She hesitated, then added, Thank you again, Isaac, for waiting. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, and a tentative hope for what might come. Sleep well, Olivia, Isaac said softly. Welcome to Cottonwood Springs. As he rode back to his hotel room through the pouring rain, Isaac found himself thinking that, despite the unexpected nature of their first meeting, perhaps things had worked out exactly as they were meant to. The next morning dawned clear and bright, washing away the previous night's gloom. Olivia woke early, having slept better than she had in months in the clean, comfortable bed Mrs. Peterson had provided. Her body ached from the long journey, but a weight had lifted from her shoulders the constant fear and uncertainty of whether she would ever reach her destination. She dressed carefully in another borrowed dress, this one a simple brown calico that Mrs. Peterson had altered slightly overnight to better fit her thin frame. The older woman had been a godsend, asking few questions about Olivia's journey, but providing exactly what she needed: food, clothes, and kindness without judgment. Over breakfast, Mrs. Peterson offered practical advice about life in Cottonwood Springs. It's a small town, mind you, not much compared to Boston, I expect, but there are good people here. What about Mr. Donovan? Olivia asked, trying to sound casual. What can you tell me about him? Mrs. Peterson smiled knowingly. Isaac's one of the good ones. Came here 6 years ago with nothing but determination and good sense. Worked as a ranch hand until he saved enough to buy his own place. Now he's got the Double D Ranch, small but prosperous. He seems kind, Olivia said carefully. He is. Steady too, which is worth more than gold out here. Mrs. Peterson poured more coffee. Not the type to make rash decisions, which is why his standing up in the saloon and claiming you caused such a stir. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. That was rather dramatic, wasn't it? Dramatic but romantic, Mrs. Peterson confirmed with a twinkle in her eye. Half the town's talking about it this morning. Before Olivia could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Peterson checked the clock on the mantel. 10 o'clock exactly, punctual as always. Isaac stood on the porch, hat in hand, wearing clean clothes and a freshly trimmed beard. He looked more composed than he had the previous night, but no less imposing. His broad shoulders filled the doorframe, and the morning sun highlighted the golden flecks in his hazel eyes. Good morning, Mrs. Peterson, he said politely before his gaze found Olivia. Miss Callahan. Mr. Donovan, Olivia replied, suddenly feeling shy despite their correspondence. I thought perhaps you might like to see the town, he suggested, if you're feeling up to it. Mrs. Peterson interjected before Olivia could answer. That sounds lovely, but first, Isaac, you'll join us for coffee. It wasn't a request, and Isaac accepted with good grace, taking a seat at the kitchen table. The conversation flowed more easily than Olivia had expected, perhaps because they had already shared so much through their letters. It was strange to finally put a face and voice to the words she'd read so many times. After coffee, Isaac escorted Olivia out to his wagon. He helped her up, his strong hands gentle at her waist. The town looked different in daylight, smaller but more vibrant than it had appeared through the rain the night before. It's not much, Isaac said as they drove slowly down the main street. But it's growing. We've got the essentials general store, blacksmith, doctor, church. He pointed out each building as they passed. It seems perfectly adequate, Olivia assured him. She had seen enough struggling towns on her journey west to appreciate one that appeared stable and well-established. Their tour eventually led them to a small restaurant at the far end of town. Mrs. Huang runs the best kitchen in the county, Isaac explained as he helped her down from the wagon. Thought you might enjoy a proper meal. The restaurant was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and curtains on the windows. The proprietress, a Chinese woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted Isaac warmly before assessing Olivia with shrewd eyes. "So, this famous bride I hear about," she said directly. "You too skinny, need food." Olivia couldn't help but laugh. "You're the second person to tell me that today." "Mrs. Peterson gossip but tell truth," Mrs. Huang declared before showing them to a corner table. Over a lunch of surprisingly delicious beef stew and fresh bread, they began the process of truly getting to know each other beyond the confines of their letters. "Tell me about your journey," Isaac said, "if you don't mind talking about it." Olivia considered how much to share. The full truth of her 3-month ordeal would cast a pall over their meal. "The stagecoach robbery happened just outside of Tucson," she began. 3 men with bandanas covering their faces. "They took everything, my trunk, my reticule with all my money, even my mother's locket." Isaac's expression darkened. "Were you hurt?" "No," she assured him quickly. "Just frightened and left with nothing but the clothes I was wearing." She took a sip of water. "The stage company couldn't offer much help. They recommended I return east, but I had nothing to go back to. So I started working my way west instead." "That must have been difficult for a woman alone." "It was." Olivia stared into her bowl for a moment. "I took whatever work I could find, washing dishes, doing laundry, cleaning rooms. Some places were kinder than others." She looked up with a small smile. "But I made it." Isaac reached across the table, hesitating before gently covering her hand with his. "You did." That took remarkable courage. His touch was warm and reassuring. Olivia found herself turning her palm upward to briefly clasp his fingers before they both withdrew. "What about you?" she asked. "Your letters told me about your ranch, but little about how you came to be here." Isaac seemed to consider his words carefully. "I grew up in Kentucky. My father had a small farm, but there wasn't enough land for me and my brothers. After the war," he paused. "I served with the Union." "As did my father," Olivia said softly. Isaac nodded. "Afterward, I couldn't settle. Drifted west, working ranches in Texas, New Mexico. Finally found this place and knew it was where I wanted to put down roots." His eyes took on a distant look. "Land's good here. With water and care, it gives back what you put in." "And yet, you found yourself advertising for a wife in Boston newspapers," Olivia observed. A slight flush appeared on his tanned cheeks. "A man gets lonely," he admitted, "and there aren't many unmarried women in these parts. At least, not the kind looking to settle on a ranch miles from town. Is it really that remote?" "It's a good 10 miles out," he confirmed. "Beautiful country, but isolated. I wanted you to understand that before you see it." "I appreciate your honesty." Olivia hesitated, then decided to broach the subject they had been avoiding. "About our arrangement. I understand if seeing me like this changes your mind." Isaac's brow furrowed. "Why would it?" "I'm not exactly the woman in that photograph anymore," she said candidly. "That was taken before my father's death, when I still had proper dresses and regular meals." "Olivia," Isaac said, leaning forward slightly, "I didn't agree to marry your photograph. I was drawn to the woman in those letters, intelligent, determined, honest. That's who arrived last night, regardless of what you were wearing." His sincerity warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. "Still, I think your original plan of a proper courtship is wise. We should get to know each other in person before making any permanent decisions." "Agreed," Isaac said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "Although, I should warn you the town's already convinced we're getting married. Mrs. Peterson will have spread the word about your arrival by now." Olivia groaned. Small towns and their gossip. Boston was much the same, just with fancier words. They shared a laugh, and for the first time since her arrival, Olivia felt truly at ease. The man across from her was indeed the same thoughtful, direct person she'd come to know through his letters. There was a steadiness to him that appealed to her after so many months of uncertainty. After lunch, Isaac suggested they visit the general store. "You'll need some things of your own," he said as they walked down the boardwalk. "Mrs. Peterson's generosity is appreciated, but you should have clothes that fit properly." "I can't accept such charity," Olivia protested. "I have no money to repay you." Isaac stopped and turned to her. "It's not charity, Olivia. It's an advance on our arrangement, if you will. You came all this way based on my promise of a home and security. The least I can do is ensure you're properly outfitted, while we determine if we suit." Put that way, she could accept his offer without feeling like a burden. "Thank you, that's very sensible." The general store was the largest building on the main street, its shelves stocked with everything from foodstuffs to tools to fabric. The proprietor, Mr. Wallace, greeted them enthusiastically. "Miss Callahan, we've heard so much about you." The balding man beamed. "Mrs. Peterson was in earlier singing your praises." Isaac gave Olivia an "I told you so" look before explaining. "Miss Callahan needs a complete wardrobe, Mr. Wallace. Her luggage was lost in her journey." Of course, of course." Mr. Wallace turned to his wife, who had appeared from the back room. "Martha, please help Miss Callahan find everything she needs. Put it on Mr. Donovan's account." While Mrs. Wallace led Olivia to the dry goods section, Isaac browsed the tool section of the store. Olivia found herself selecting practical items: 2 everyday dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, a shawl, and sturdy boots. Mrs. Wallace, a kind woman with a practical eye, helped her choose appropriate fabrics and styles. "You'll need a Sunday dress too," the woman insisted, "for church and social gatherings." Olivia hesitated over a blue dress with delicate white piping. It was the most expensive item she'd selected. "Perhaps that's not necessary yet." "Of course it is," came Isaac's voice from behind her. He'd approached without her noticing. "Get whatever you need, Olivia, please." Something in his expression, a mix of sincerity and hope, made it impossible to refuse. By the time they left the store, Olivia had acquired enough clothing and personal items to feel like herself again, though Mr. Wallace would need time to alter the dresses to fit her properly. Their next stop was the small church at the end of town, where Isaac introduced her to Reverend Thompson, a genial man in his 60s. "Miss Callahan, what a pleasure," the Reverend said, shaking her hand warmly. "Isaac has been waiting most anxiously for your arrival." "Has he?" Olivia glanced at Isaac, who looked slightly embarrassed. "Indeed. Came to services every Sunday without fail, though I suspect he was praying for your safe journey as much as attending to his spiritual needs." The Reverend's eyes twinkled with good humor. "I believe in covering all possibilities," Isaac said dryly, but there was a softness in his eyes when he looked at Olivia. As they walked back toward the wagon, Isaac asked, "Would you like to see the ranch tomorrow? It's a fair drive, but I thought you might want to see where you'd be living, if you decide to stay, that is." The question hung between them, full of unspoken significance. Olivia knew that seeing the ranch would move their courtship forward in a tangible way. It would make real what had until now existed primarily in letters and tentative conversations. "I'd like that very much," she said finally. Isaac's smile was quick and genuine. "I'll pick you up after breakfast. Wear the sturdy boots when they're delivered." That evening, back at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, Olivia found herself the center of attention at dinner. 3 other boarders, a young schoolteacher, an elderly widow, and a bank clerk peppered her with questions about Boston and her journey west. She provided edited versions of both, uncomfortable with sharing the full extent of her hardships. After dinner, Mrs. Peterson handed her a small bundle. "Special delivery from the store," she explained. "Your nightgown and one of the dresses. Mr. Wallace's wife worked on them all afternoon." In the privacy of her room, Olivia changed into the new nightgown, relishing the feel of clean, properly fitting clothes. She stood before the small mirror hanging on the wall, hardly recognizing herself. Just 24 hours had brought such transformation from a desperate woman in rags to someone beginning to resemble the person she'd once been. As she brushed out her hair, Olivia contemplated the day's events. Isaac Donovan was everything his letters had suggested: honest, direct, and kind. There was an underlying strength to him that she found deeply reassuring after months of vulnerability. Yet she sensed complexity too, moments when a shadow crossed his face or his eyes grew distant. The woman who had left Boston 6 months ago might have been looking for security above all else. The woman who had traveled the hard road west had learned that security could be an illusion. What Olivia wanted now was something more nuanced: partnership, respect, and perhaps, eventually, love. She closed her eyes and allowed herself, for the first time in months, to hope. The morning sun had barely crested the mountains when Isaac arrived at the boarding house the next day. He'd spent the previous evening preparing the ranch for Olivia's visit, cleaning the house more thoroughly than he had in months and ensuring everything was in order. His foreman, Miguel Ortega, had watched these preparations with knowing amusement, but had wisely kept his comments to himself. Olivia was ready when he arrived, dressed in one of her new outfits, a practical brown skirt and cream-colored shirtwaist, with her hair neatly pinned beneath a simple hat. The sturdy boots Mr. Wallace had sent over completed her ensemble. "You look well," Isaac said as he helped her into the wagon. "I feel more like myself," she admitted. "Amazing what proper clothes and a few good meals can do." The journey to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, giving them time to talk. Isaac pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area as they traveled, while Olivia asked thoughtful questions about the land and his operation. "It's beautiful country," she observed as they crested a hill that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. Pine-covered mountains rose in the distance, while closer at hand, grassland rolled toward a creek lined with cottonwoods. "That's the Double D," Isaac said, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled near where the creek bent. "Not as grand as some spreads, but it's mine." As they drew closer, Olivia could make out a modest but well-built log house with a covered porch, a large barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals and outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, watched over by a rider on horseback. "How many acres?" she asked, trying to gauge the size of the operation. 640, Isaac replied. "A full section. The water rights are what make it valuable. That creek never runs dry, even in the worst drought." They pulled up in front of the house, where a man with graying black hair and a weathered face approached to help with the horses. "Miss Callahan, this is Miguel Ortega, my foreman," Isaac introduced. "Miguel, Miss Olivia Callahan." "A pleasure, Miss Callahan," Miguel said with a slight accent and a respectful nod. "We've heard much about you." "All good things, I hope," Olivia replied with a smile. "The boss has been like a bear with a thorn these past months, waiting for you," Miguel said with a twinkle in his eye. "Today, he is like a different man." Isaac cleared his throat. "That'll do, Miguel. Please see to the horses." The foreman grinned and led the team away, leaving Isaac looking slightly embarrassed. "Miguel's been with me since I started, takes certain liberties." "I like him," Olivia decided. "How many hands do you employ?" "4, including Miguel, plus a cook." Isaac helped her down from the wagon. "Would you like to see the house first, or tour the ranch?" "The house, I think," Olivia said. She was curious about where Isaac lived, what kind of home he had created here in the wilderness. The exterior was simple but sturdy, with a wide porch spanning the front. Inside, Olivia found a surprisingly spacious main room with a stone fireplace, comfortable if plain furniture, and large windows that let in ample light. A dining area with a solid oak table stood at one end, while a kitchen occupied a separate room at the back. "It's larger than I expected," Olivia commented, running her hand along the back of a leather chair. "Built it to grow into," Isaac explained. "There are 3 bedrooms down that hallway." He gestured but didn't offer to show her, a consideration of propriety she appreciated. The house was clean and organized, but unmistakably a bachelor's dwelling. There were few decorative touches, a couple of landscape paintings, a bookshelf filled with practical titles on ranching, and a few novels, and a bearskin rug before the fireplace. "Did you shoot the bear?" Olivia asked, nodding toward the rug. "Had to. He was killing calves." Isaac looked at her as if gauging her reaction to this reality of ranch life. "I'm not squeamish," she assured him. "I understand the necessities of survival." Something in her tone must have conveyed her deeper meaning, because Isaac's expression softened. "Yes, I believe you do." After showing her the rest of the house, including a small study where he kept the ranch accounts, Isaac suggested they continue the tour outside. The day had warmed pleasantly, and Olivia welcomed the fresh air and open space after her long confinement to stagecoaches and small rooms. The ranch was impressive in its efficiency. Everything had a purpose, from the carefully designed corrals to the positioning of the outbuildings. Isaac explained the operation as they walked the breeding program he'd established, the hay fields that provided winter feed, the improvements he planned for the coming year. "You've accomplished a great deal in 6 years," Olivia observed as they watched a group of hands working with young cattle in one of the corrals. "It's been my sole focus," Isaac admitted. "Perhaps too much so. Is that why you decided to advertise for a wife?" The question was direct, but Olivia felt they had reached a point where such directness was warranted. Isaac considered her question seriously before answering. "Partly. I realized I'd built something worth sharing, but had no one to share it with." He glanced at her. "There's more to life than work, though it took me some time to recognize that." "And what would you want from a wife, beyond sharing your accomplishments?" Olivia pressed. They had stopped walking and stood facing each other beside the corral fence. Isaac's expression was thoughtful. "Companionship," he said finally. "Someone to talk with at day's end. Someone whose opinion I value. Children, eventually." His eyes held hers steadily. "A true partner, Olivia. Not just a housekeeper or a mother for future children." His answer pleased her more than she wanted to admit. "And if this wife had opinions about how the ranch should be run?" A smile tugged at his lips. "I'd listen. Might not always agree, but I'd listen." "A fair answer," Olivia conceded with an answering smile. They continued their tour, stopping to rest in the shade of a large cottonwood tree near the creek. Isaac had brought a simple lunch packed by Mrs. Peterson, and they sat on a blanket enjoying bread, cheese, and apples while watching the play of sunlight on the water. "What do you think?" Isaac asked after a comfortable silence. "Could you see yourself living here?" Olivia considered the question carefully. The ranch was remote, the work would be demanding, and the life would be very different from what she'd known in Boston. Yet there was an honesty to it, a straightforward purpose that appealed to her. "I could," she said finally. "It's beautiful in its own way, and there's a sense of rightness to it." Relief flickered across Isaac's face. "The winters can be harsh," he warned, "and summers bring their own challenges." "I didn't expect paradise," Olivia said wryly. "Just a place where I could build a life with dignity." "That I can offer," Isaac said quietly. His hand found hers on the blanket, and this time neither of them pulled away. His calloused fingers were gentle against her skin. And Olivia felt a flutter of something more than practical consideration in her chest. The moment was interrupted by the approach of Miguel on horseback. "Boss," he called. "The buyers from Prescott arrived early. They're waiting at the house." Isaac sighed and reluctantly released her hand. "I need to handle this," he explained, standing and helping her to her feet. "They're here to look at some breeding stock." "Of course," Olivia said, brushing crumbs from her skirt. "Business comes first." "Not always," Isaac said meaningfully. "But this particular business helps keep the ranch running." They walked back to the house, where 2 well-dressed men waited on the porch. Isaac introduced Olivia briefly before excusing himself to conduct business. She found herself at loose ends, unwilling to enter the house alone, but not wanting to intrude on Isaac's negotiations. Miguel, who had dismounted nearby, seemed to sense her discomfort. "Miss Callahan, perhaps you would like to see the garden. Mrs. Ortega would be pleased to meet you." Grateful for the suggestion, Olivia allowed Miguel to lead her to a fenced area behind the cook's cabin, where a surprisingly lush vegetable garden flourished. A small, robust woman with silver-streaked black hair was working among the plants. "Maria," Miguel called, "come meet Miss Callahan." Maria Ortega wiped her hands on her apron and approached with a welcoming smile. Though her English was heavily accented, her warmth needed no translation. She proudly showed Olivia through the garden, pointing out the various vegetables and herbs she grew to supply the ranch kitchen. "The boss, he likes my cooking," Maria stated confidently. "But he needs a wife. Too thin, that man. Works too hard." Olivia found herself laughing at the woman's frankness. "So I've observed. You will be good wife," Maria declared, studying Olivia with shrewd eyes. "Strong, smart, not afraid of work." "We're still getting acquainted," Olivia demurred, though she was touched by the woman's approval. Maria waved a dismissive hand. "I see how he looks at you. Different than the others." "Others?" Olivia couldn't help asking. "2 ladies from town tried to catch him," Maria explained with a knowing smile. "Bring food, offer to mend his clothes. He was polite, but—" She shrugged expressively. Not interested. Too busy writing letters to Boston. This unexpected insight into Isaac's life over the past months gave Olivia a quiet satisfaction she tried not to examine too closely. By the time Isaac found them, Maria had loaded Olivia's arms with fresh vegetables and was explaining her methods for preserving food for winter. "I see you've met our miracle worker," Isaac said, approaching with a relaxed smile that suggested his business had gone well. "Maria keeps us all fed and healthy." "She's been very kind," Olivia replied, "and informative." Maria patted Olivia's arm. "She asks good questions, wants to learn." Good for a rancher's wife. With that pointed observation, she excused herself to prepare the evening meal. "I hope Maria wasn't too forthright," Isaac said as they walked back toward the main house. "She tends to speak her mind." "A quality I appreciate," Olivia assured him, "and she clearly thinks highly of you." "The Ortegas have been like family," Isaac admitted. "Miguel taught me most of what I know about cattle, and Maria." He smiled fondly. "Well, without her cooking and occasional mothering, I might not have survived those first few years." As the afternoon waned, Olivia found herself reluctant to leave. The ranch had a peaceful quality she hadn't experienced in a long time. Yet, as shadows lengthened, Isaac regretfully mentioned they should start back to town. "I'd invite you to stay for supper," he said, "but it would be dark before we could get you back to Mrs. Peterson's, and I don't want to cause gossip." "Another time," Olivia suggested, touched by his consideration of her reputation. The journey back was quieter, both of them reflective after the day's experiences. As they approached Cottonwood Springs, Olivia broke the comfortable silence. "Thank you for today, Isaac. I enjoyed seeing your home." "Our home," he corrected gently. "If you decide you want it to be." The simple statement carried such weight, such possibility. Olivia looked at his profile, strong against the sunset sky, and felt a certainty growing within her. This man, this place, they offered not just security, but the chance for something deeper. "I'd like to continue our courtship," she said carefully, "but I think we both know where it's leading." Isaac glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the last golden light of day. "Do we?" "Yes," Olivia said simply. "I believe we do." His smile was slow and full of promise. As they rode into town in the gathering dusk, Olivia felt for the first time in many months that her future held more than mere survival. It held the possibility of happiness. The next 2 weeks established a rhythm to their courtship. Isaac rode into town every morning, spending time with Olivia while still attending to necessary ranch business. They took meals together, attended Sunday services at Reverend Thompson's church, and gradually became familiar with each other's habits and preferences. To Olivia's delight, Isaac brought books from his small library when he learned of her love of reading. They discussed the stories over lunch at Mrs. Huang's restaurant, or during walks along the creek that ran behind the town. Isaac proved to be a thoughtful, if sometimes reserved, conversationalist, with opinions formed through experience rather than formal education. For his part, Isaac found himself increasingly captivated by Olivia's resilience and intelligence. The hardships she had endured on her journey west had tempered rather than broken her spirit. She asked insightful questions about the ranch operation and offered practical suggestions that showed she was thinking seriously about her potential role there. "Have you considered planting fruit trees near the house?" she asked one afternoon as they sat in the town's small park. Apples and pears would do well in this climate, and preserves would be welcome in winter. "I hadn't," Isaac admitted. "My focus has been on cattle and hay." "A homestead needs diversity," Olivia said thoughtfully. "My mother always said a good orchard is an investment in the future. Trees planted now will feed your children and grandchildren." The casual mention of future generations sent a warm current through Isaac. He found himself increasingly picturing Olivia in his home. Not as a guest, but as its mistress reading by the fire in the evenings, working alongside Maria in the garden, perhaps someday rocking a child to sleep on the front porch. As their courtship progressed, the town's interest in their relationship grew rather than diminished. Cottonwood Springs hadn't seen such a romantic story unfold in years, and the unusual circumstances of their first meeting had become something of a local legend. "You're causing quite a stir," Reverend Thompson commented to Isaac after services one Sunday. "Mrs. Wallace at the store tells me they've never sold so many romance novels. The ladies of the town are quite inspired by your devotion." Isaac felt his ears redden. Hardly seems like a private matter anymore. That's small town life for you, the Reverend said with a chuckle. But it's good to see you happy, son. Miss Callahan seems like a fine woman. She is, Isaac agreed, watching as Olivia chatted with Mrs. Peterson and several other women near the church steps. She had gained some weight in the past weeks, and color had returned to her cheeks. In her Sunday dress of blue with white piping, the one he'd insisted she purchase, she looked every inch the genteel Bostonian she'd once been. Yet there was a newfound confidence in her bearing that spoke of her journey and survival. Mid-October brought cooler weather and the town's harvest festival, an annual celebration that drew people from outlying ranches and nearby settlements. Isaac invited Olivia to attend with him, a public declaration of their courtship that wouldn't go unnoticed. The day of the festival dawned clear and crisp. Isaac arrived at the boarding house earlier than usual, dressed in his best clothes, with a small bouquet of late wildflowers he'd gathered on the way. Olivia accepted the flowers with genuine pleasure. How lovely! I didn't think anything would still be blooming. Found them in a sheltered spot near the creek, Isaac explained. Thought you might like a little color. Mrs. Peterson appeared with a small vase. Perfect timing for your first festival together, she said, with barely concealed delight as she arranged the flowers. The whole town's turning out today. The festival was held in the large meadow behind the church, where tables had been set up, displaying local produce, handicrafts, and baked goods. A platform served as a stage for music and announcements, and several cooking fires promised good food later in the day. As Isaac and Olivia walked among the displays, they were stopped frequently by townspeople eager to introduce themselves or continue the acquaintance begun at church. Olivia handled the attention with grace, her natural charm, and genuine interest in people serving her well. "You're a hit," Isaac murmured as they finally found a moment alone near the cider press. "Everyone's been very welcoming," Olivia said, "though I'm not sure I'll remember all these names." "You've impressed Mrs. Caldwell," Isaac noted, nodding toward the banker's wife, who had cornered them earlier. "She's something of a social arbiter in these parts." Olivia smiled wryly. "Boston society was more demanding. I learned to navigate difficult personalities from an early age." The day progressed pleasantly, with contests and games, music from local musicians, and eventually a communal feast. As they sat at one of the long tables enjoying roast beef and Mrs. Huang's famous apple dumplings, Olivia noticed Isaac seemed increasingly distracted. "Is everything all right?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, then said, "I'd like to speak with you privately. After the meal, perhaps?" Intrigued, Olivia nodded. When they had finished eating, Isaac led her away from the crowds toward a stand of trees at the edge of the meadow. The sounds of the festival laughter, music, children playing created a cheerful backdrop to what felt suddenly like a significant moment. "Olivia," Isaac began, facing her with unusual solemnity, "these past weeks have been important to me." "To me as well," she said softly, sensing he needed encouragement to continue. "I've been thinking about our arrangement." He took a deep breath. "I know we agreed to a proper courtship, and perhaps it's still early, but I find myself certain of my feelings." Olivia's heart quickened. "And what are those feelings?" "I admire you," Isaac said simply. "Your courage, your intelligence, your strength. I enjoy your company more than I've enjoyed anything in years." He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his. "I believe we would suit each other well as husband and wife." Though she had anticipated this moment, Olivia found herself momentarily speechless. The directness of his proposal, for that's what it was, struck her deeply. No flowery declarations, just honest sentiment and clear intent. "Are you asking me to marry you, Isaac?" "I am," he confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not because of our original agreement, but because I've come to care for you, Olivia, more than I expected to." The distinction was important. What had begun as a practical arrangement had evolved into something more meaningful for both of them. "When?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "As soon as you're ready," Isaac replied. "Reverend Thompson could perform the ceremony whenever we choose." Olivia considered his proposal carefully, though in truth, her heart had already decided. The past weeks had shown her that Isaac was everything his letters had suggested, and more honorable, hard-working, and kind. He treated her with respect and valued her opinions. And beyond these practical considerations, there was a growing affection between them that promised deeper feeling with time. "Yes," she said finally, squeezing his hands. "I will marry you, Isaac Donovan." The smile that transformed his face was worth any uncertainty she might have felt. He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with a reverence that touched her deeply. "Would 2 weeks be enough time to prepare?" he asked. "I don't want to rush you, but—" "2 weeks is perfect," Olivia interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I don't need elaborate preparations." They returned to the festival with their news, which spread quickly through the gathering. Congratulations poured in from all sides, along with good-natured teasing for Isaac about how his dramatic declaration in the saloon had proven prophetic. Later that evening, as they sat together watching the bonfire that marked the end of the festival, Isaac spoke of practical matters. "I'll speak to Reverend Thompson tomorrow about the ceremony, and I'll need to prepare the house. The master bedroom needs fresh paint, and there are curtains to hang. I can help with those things," Olivia offered. "Now that our intentions are formalized, perhaps I could spend more time at the ranch before the wedding?" "With Mrs. Peterson as chaperone," Isaac agreed, mindful of propriety. "She's already hinted she'd be willing to help you settle in." The 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Word of their engagement traveled beyond Cottonwood Springs, bringing curious visitors from neighboring communities to see the mail-ordered bride who had arrived in rags and won the heart of one of the area's most eligible ranchers. The women of the town rallied around Olivia, organizing a small gathering to present her with household items and share advice about married life. Some of the suggestions made her blush, but she appreciated the good-natured support behind them. 3 days before the wedding, a package arrived from Boston. Olivia opened it with trembling hands to find a letter from her former neighbor, Mrs. Grant, along with a simple but elegant white dress. "When your advertisement response was accepted, I feared I might never see you again," the older woman had written. "But I couldn't bear the thought of you marrying without something special to wear. I hope this finds you well and happy in your new life." The gesture brought tears to Olivia's eyes. Mrs. Grant had been one of the few who had shown kindness after her father's death, and the dress was a perfect reminder of the life she had left behind, not with regret, but with hope for a new beginning. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, with the golden light of late October filtering through the changing leaves. The small church was filled to capacity with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area, all drawn by the romance of the occasion and genuine goodwill toward the couple. Isaac stood at the altar with Miguel as his best man, looking uncharacteristically nervous in his new suit. When the church door opened and Olivia appeared on the arm of Reverend Thompson, standing in for her deceased father, a hush fell over the congregation. In her white dress with a simple veil and a bouquet of autumn flowers, Olivia was radiant. As she walked slowly toward him, Isaac felt a swell of emotion he hadn't anticipated, not just happiness or satisfaction, but a profound gratitude that this remarkable woman had traveled so far to find him. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, with Isaac's deep voice carrying clearly through the church and Olivia's responses firm and sure. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers from the congregation nearly drowned out his instruction for Isaac to kiss his bride. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise of tenderness rather than passion, though Isaac's hand at the small of her back conveyed a warmth that brought color to Olivia's cheeks. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, the applause was thunderous. The celebration continued at the town hall, where tables groaned under the weight of food, contributed by nearly every household in Cottonwood Springs. Mrs. Huang had prepared a special wedding cake, Mrs. Peterson had organized a dance floor, and Mr. Wallace had donated enough whiskey to ensure high spirits throughout the afternoon. As the festivities continued around them, Isaac and Olivia found a moment of quiet in a corner of the hall. "Happy?" he asked, his hand covering hers on the table between them. "Very," she confirmed with a smile that reached her eyes, though a bit overwhelmed by all the attention. "We could leave whenever you're ready," Isaac suggested. "I've prepared the wagon for the journey home." The word home held new significance now. Olivia nodded. "Soon. I should thank everyone first." Their departure an hour later was accompanied by cheers, well wishes, and a shower of flower petals. The wagon had been decorated with ribbons and a hand-painted sign declaring, "Just married," a surprise from the young people of the town. As they drove away, Olivia leaned against Isaac's shoulder, feeling a contentment she had not expected when she'd first set out from Boston. The journey had been harder than anticipated, the destination different from what she'd imagined. But the outcome was better than she could have hoped. "I've been thinking," Isaac said after they had traveled a few miles in the comfortable silence, "about what you said regarding fruit trees." "Oh?" Olivia looked up at him, surprised by the practical turn of the conversation. "I ordered some saplings from a nursery in Phoenix. They should arrive next spring." He glanced down at her with a small smile. "You were right about planning for the future." The simple gesture that he had listened to her suggestion and acted upon it touched Olivia deeply. It was a confirmation of the partnership he had promised, a tangible sign that her thoughts and ideas were valued. "Thank you," she said softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. "For everything." Isaac turned his head to press a kiss against her palm. "We're just beginning, Olivia. The best is yet to come." As the wagon crested the final hill before the ranch, the setting sun cast long shadows across the valley. The buildings of the Double D Ranch stood in silhouette against the golden light, not grand or imposing, but solid and welcoming. The home they would build together, not just in structure, but in life and love. Olivia took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the clean, sage-scented air of the high desert. 6 months ago, she had been desperate and alone in Boston. 3 months ago, she had been robbed and abandoned in the Arizona territory. 1 month ago, she had walked into a saloon in rags at the end of her strength, but not her determination. And now, as Isaac helped her down from the wagon and carried her across the threshold of their home, Olivia Callahan Donovan knew with certainty that she had found not just shelter, but belonging. 5 years later, the Double D Ranch had prospered beyond even Isaac's hopeful projections. The herd had doubled in size and quality. The orchard Olivia had suggested was beginning to bear fruit, and the ranch house had expanded to accommodate their growing family. On a warm spring afternoon, Isaac rode back from checking fence lines to find his wife sitting on the porch, reading to their 3-year-old daughter, Rebecca, while their infant son, James, slept in a cradle beside them. The scene, so domestic and peaceful, still had the power to stop him in his tracks with gratitude. Olivia looked up as he approached, her smile as welcoming as it had been on their wedding day. Motherhood and ranch life had added character to her beauty, a few laugh lines around her eyes. Hands that showed evidence of hard work, skin tanned by the Arizona sun. To Isaac, she had never been more lovely. "Papa!" Rebecca called, scrambling off her mother's lap and racing down the steps toward him. He swung down from his horse in time to catch her, lifting her high in the air before settling her on his hip. "And how's my little cowgirl today?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her dark curls, so like her mother's. "Mama's teaching me letters," Rebecca announced proudly. "I can write my name." "Is that so? You'll have to show me after supper." Isaac carried her up the steps to where Olivia waited. He leaned down to kiss his wife, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the years. "How's the boy?" "Growing stronger every day," Olivia reported, glancing fondly at their sleeping son. "Miguel says he'll be riding before we know it." The ranch had grown in other ways too. What had once been a bachelor operation with a handful of hands had evolved into a true community. Miguel and Maria still formed the backbone of the staff, but several families had joined them, living in newly built cabins scattered around the property. Olivia had established a small school for the children, teaching reading and arithmetic 3 mornings a week. Their success had not come without challenges. 2 harsh winters, a drought season, and a bout of cattle fever had tested their resilience. But through it all, the partnership Isaac had promised and Olivia had embraced had proven its worth. They faced each difficulty together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they were building. As they sat on the porch that evening after the children were asleep, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky, Isaac reached for Olivia's hand. "Do you ever think about that day you walked into the Broken Spoke?" he asked. "How different things might have been if you'd arrived on schedule, or if I hadn't been there that particular evening?" Olivia considered the question, her fingers twined comfortably with his. "Sometimes, but then I think perhaps it happened exactly as it was meant to." She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the lamplight from inside the house. You recognize me, even in rags. That seems like more than coincidence." "I did," Isaac agreed softly. "Knew you immediately, though I couldn't have explained why." "And claimed me as your bride before we'd even been properly introduced," Olivia teased, a familiar joke between them now. "Best declaration I ever made," Isaac said with conviction, bringing her hand to his lips. "Even if it did scandalize half the town." "Only half?" Olivia laughed. "I think Mrs. Caldwell nearly fainted." They sat in comfortable silence for a time, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, distant lowing of cattle, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, the rustle of wind through the young orchard. "Are you happy, Olivia?" Isaac asked finally, the question more serious than it might have seemed. "With this life? With me?" Olivia turned to him fully, moonlight silvering her features. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said with quiet certainty. "When I left Boston, I hoped for security and perhaps respect. I found those things, yes, but also love and purpose and joy." She leaned forward to kiss him gently. "You're a good man, Isaac Donovan, the best of men." As they retired to their bedroom later that night, Isaac thought about the twists of fate that had brought them together: a newspaper advertisement, delayed stagecoaches, a desperate journey, and a chance meeting in a saloon. So much could have gone differently, yet somehow they had found each other. In the morning, there would be work waiting, cattle to tend, children to raise, a ranch to run. The life they had built required constant attention and care, but it was a good life, rich in meaning and connection, a testament to what could grow from humble beginnings when nurtured with patience and love. And as Isaac held his wife close in the darkness, he remembered the woman in rags who had walked into the saloon that stormy night, proud despite her circumstances, determined against all odds. He had recognized something essential in her then, something that transcended appearance or situation. Now, 5 years later, he knew that recognition for what it truly was, the beginning of love, a love that had only deepened with each passing season. Outside their window, the young apple trees Olivia had insisted upon stood in orderly rows, their spring blossoms a promise of fruit to come. Like their marriage, like their family, like the ranch itself, an investment in a future they would build together, day by day, year by year, with faith in each other and in the life they had chosen to share.